Hello and welcome into another episode of Lockdown Wolves. Today on the show, the ownership battle is over at long last. We'll talk about the biggest, most groundbreaking differences and biggest changes, biggest exciting things about the new Lori Rodriguez ownership group. We'll do all that here next.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Lockdown Wolves podcast, part of the Lockdown Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Lockdown Wolves. Today's episode is brought to us by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Happy Thursday, everybody. Happy Timberwolves game day. The Wolves are in Brooklyn playing the Nets. For the first time this year, weirdly enough, now that we're in the month of April, they play the Nets twice for the next week and a half or so here. We'll preview that game here in a little while. We will talk a bit of Western Conference playoff picture, what's most different about this year's Wolves team heading into the playoffs versus last year's. We'll hit a couple of quick things there. But I want to spend the first part of today's show talking about the new ownership group. We've talked about it on and off for the last 3.5 years plus 4 years now since the transaction first was announced in 2021. But it's over now. Not officially, but Shams Charania of ESPN reports that it is about to be over. Glenn Taylor is not going to fight this anymore, and he's going to allow Marc and Alex Rodriguez to purchase the team from him at the valuation for 2021. So we'll break all that down, but I want to rank the biggest benefits of the ownership battle being done and the new group with Lori and Rodriguez. It's been a while since we've dug in on that. So I want to do that for the first part of the show, so we got kind of level set with where this franchise is now moving forward, now that the off-the-court stuff, at least in regards to ownership, is about to be over. So we'll do all that here at the beginning. First, though, big thank you for making Lockdown Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Lockdown Wolves. You can also watch on the Lockdown Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And a reminder, you can subscribe to the daily newsletter at LockedOnDaily.com. You'll get an email in your inbox every day, Monday through Friday. It's one-stop shop for all things Wolves and also all things NBA. So be sure to subscribe. That's over at LockedOnDaily.com. All right. So Timberwolves are finally officially going to be sold to Marc and Alex Rodriguez. Of course, Marc, the billionaire, multiple website, seller of multiple websites and companies and former Walmart executive. And Alex Rodriguez, of course, the former MLB superstar. And the deal's finally going to be over. It's interesting. Glenn Taylor was back courtside over the weekend last weekend. We hadn't seen him at Target Center in a long time. And now we hear that Glenn Taylor's backing off of his challenge to the arbitration ruling that the panel that each party selected one member and then the third member was mutually agreed upon. They ruled 2-1 in favor of the Lori Rodriguez group. And Glenn Taylor was, according to Adam Silver last week at the press conference following the latest Board of Governors meeting at the NBA level, the league level, he said that Glenn Taylor was exploring his options related to potentially challenging the arbitration ruling, appealing it, and apparently now he's backing off of that, according to Shams Charania of ESPN. This appears to be something that can now happen very quickly. And we're going to talk about I want to kind of rank the biggest benefits of this battle being done. The saga, of course, now goes back to 2021 when the evaluation of the team was agreed upon at $1.5 billion. And now they're worth more than twice that, depending on where you look. Actually, wherever you look, they're worth at least twice that. The Celtics sale was $6 billion. The Suns were sold not long after the Wolves for a lot more than $1.5 billion. And now the valuation is like a little over $3 million for the Wolves. And it's probably actually even higher than that, given that the Celtics went for $6 million. So clearly some buyer's remorse from Glenn Taylor. We're just a year past, or just over a year past, when he first started kind of raising a stink about, not allowing the sale to go through last March after things had seemed amicable, at least publicly, up to that point. And now here we are, where it should be about over just in time for the playoffs. So I want to talk about the biggest benefits. The number one benefit of Marc and Alex Rodriguez being the not just majority owners, but the really sole owners owning 100% of the team, is Tim Connelly. And if something changes there, then I guess I'm wrong about this, but it really seems like that's going to be the biggest benefit. Rodriguez and Laurie, even though they were the minority ownership group at the time when Tim Connelly was hired away from the Nuggets, they led the charge to hire an analytically driven, still a guy with a scouting background in Tim Connelly, but somebody who um, had both, right? Like Tim Connelly has a history as a scout. He has a history as somebody who's willing and able to use analytics. And Lorian Rodriguez led the charge to hire him away from the Nuggets, who, of course, won a championship the year after Connelly came to Minnesota. Connelly quickly took the Wolves from a non-playoff team to a 56-win team last year that got to the conference finals, acquired Rudy Gobert very quickly, future Hall of Famer, multiple-time Defensive Player of the Year, and retained Chris Finch as the head coach of the team. After he took over, of course, Chris Finch was hired away from the Raptors mid-season by Gerson Rosas, who was fired prior to Tim Connelly being hired to Minnesota. But he retained Chris Finch, made a host of moves, and here we are. The Gobert trade, which no matter your feelings on the acquisition cost for Rudy Gobert, they're a better team with Rudy Gobert than they were prior to the Rudy Gobert trade. The D'Angelo Russell for Mike Conley and Nickeil Alexander-Walker heist, the absolute heist of the Utah Jazz, plus a couple of second-round picks. Really was a heist of the Lakers. The Lakers got the short end of that deal, landing D'Angelo Russell in that three-team deal. We could go on and on down the list, but the reason why this is such a coup when it comes to Tim Connelly is not only they hired him away, they gave him an opt-out in his contract following last season. And because of the uncertainty surrounding the ownership battle, he was able to negotiate kicking that 1 year forward. So Tim Connelly's opt-out is this summer. I don't know the exact date, but I believe the reporting last year it was in June or July. I mean, it's quite literally like shortly after the finals and the draft and around free agency. So Tim Connelly could opt out this summer. And it certainly seems like if Glenn Taylor had won this battle, there's a decent chance he would have been like, yeah, no, I'm good. I don't need I'd rather, I was brought here by progressive owners, and now I have an 83-year-old owner that has a history of not having winning basketball teams. So I'm good. But with Lorian Rodriguez firmly in the driver's seat and running the show in Minneapolis, I don't see any reason why Tim Connelly wouldn't come back. Now, he probably still opts out and negotiates a larger deal, especially if the Wolves win a playoff round or whatever, say they come in as a 5-6 seed, whatever, and they win a playoff round or they're even more competitive than that. There's a lot of, even if they don't, Tim Connelly undoubtedly opts out. But the further the Wolves go in the playoffs, the more leverage he has to try and negotiate a new deal. So don't panic if and when he does opt out, but just know that if Glenn Taylor was in charge, he's opting out to likely leave. In this case, he's going to opt out for a larger contract. That is the biggest victory of this ownership battle, is the high likelihood that Tim Connelly remains the president of basketball operations with the Wolves. And far and away, that's the number one thing. The number two thing, I think, is going to be the reintegration or the I guess, re-inclusion of Kevin Garnett in the Timberwolves world. He's been largely absent. I think he's been in the building once or twice since he was retired. Remember, the Wolves, of course, Flip Saunders acquired him from the Nets after a couple seasons with Minnesota. Garnett retired, and he hasn't been back because after kind of halfway burying the hatchet with Glenn Taylor when that trade happened, Flip Saunders was the one that smoothed it over. There was a dispute over Garnett, was supposed to get a chunk of ownership, according to Garnett, in the team, but Flip Saunders died, and Glenn Taylor had a different view on things than Kevin Garnett, as has happened multiple times in history. And Garnett's been back in the building. There was the one time with the Prince jerseys, the Derrick Rose season. KG was in the audience, sitting courtside. And, he's been kind of tangentially, like, he played briefly with Karl Anthony Towns at the start of Cat's career. So there was that relationship. He's spoken highly of Ant and obviously has spoken to Ant, but he's not been around the building, not been around the facility, certainly not officially part of the team. And it's well documented he's refused to have his jersey retired by the Timberwolves because of the Glenn Taylor component. But with Glenn out of the picture, this could happen very quickly. And Shams Charania confirmed that. We've seen that, Darren Wolfson locally at KSTP and Score North has reported that. I believe John Krasinski's reported as well. So very likely it could even be this season. And don't be surprised if Lorian Rodriguez are pushing for like a first round of the playoffs type emotional, Garnett jersey retirement or just his presence in the building. Maybe the retirement happens next fall. Who knows? But expect Kevin Garnett to be involved. Now, to be clear, I am not interested in having Kevin Garnett in the front office with any real decision-making power. If he wants to be a consultant and part-time player development, not that he wouldn't have that title, but, be around and involved and on the court at practice, fine. If he wants to be an ambassador for the team and hold some sort of advisor title, fine. Now, I don't think he would be getting decision-making power with Tim Connelly in the fold, but still, I feel the need to say that like, let's not let KG make personnel decisions, because he basically did when he was on the team, and that didn't turn out great. Troy Hudson, like go on down the list of the guys that was, I mean, that's the most obvious one, but there's several, Joe Smith, that whole thing. Anyway, Tim Connelly likely coming back and Kevin Garnett likely getting involved very quickly are the two biggest things. I have two more that I want to talk about. And then I want to get into, we'll talk about the Brooklyn matchup, Wolves-Nets tonight. We'll talk about the Western Conference standings, give an update there, and a couple of quick things about why I think the Wolves are arguably just as dangerous in the playoffs as they were last season. We'll talk about all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors over at FanDuel. The NCAA tournament is still happening. The Final Four this weekend, the championship game on Monday, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. New customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to, at this point, who's going to cut down the nets here upcoming this weekend, or I guess Monday night. We've already had teams cut down the nets going to the Final Four, but who wins the whole thing? You can pick your favorite right now in the Final Four. Of course, all 4 1 seeds are still in the bracket. You can look at spreads, totals, game props, etc. Tournament games Saturday is the Final Four. Monday night's the championship. There's always something exciting to bet on. And the best thing about the whole thing is that the FanDuel app is super simple to use. And when you win, you get paid instantly with no waiting around. Visit FanDuel.com. Get in on the college hoops action all weekend long. Okay, top 2 reasons for the to be excited about the Lori Rodriguez ownership takeover. Tim Connelly, Kevin Garnett. Number 3, the future of the Timberwolves arena, and secondarily to that, but I would put in the same category, media, and how. What I mean by that is how Wolves games are distributed, broadcast, streaming, etc. So we'll start with the arena. The Wolves have the oldest building in the league. That's not an actual historic, like a good historic building. The Wolves also have the only, this is kind of a fun, not so fun fact about Target Center. It was the last arena to be built with more seats in the upper level than the lower level. There's too many suites. Like, the way that games are consumed now in person is very different. Obviously there's more opportunities to make money at the corporate level with the new arena. Different experiences beyond like second level suites, right? It's the courtside spaces, it's the lounges, etc. The loge, the new versions of loge boxes, club seating type stuff. But then also just the overall fan amenities that just are lacking at Target Center in a building that, is what, 36 years old at this point. Or actually, 35-ish years old. Concessions offerings, common spaces for fans, and there's a lot to be seen here. Of course, Lori and Rodriguez are both involved in real estate, and so that was an early kind of conversation, is that they would look to figure something out in regards to the arena. The most recent renovation is just a few years old, but a lot more needs to be done. So that means at some point in the relatively near future, we're going to start to hear a lot more seriously about a new arena for the Wolves. And then also, given the way everything's gone down with Bally, which became FanDuel Sports Network in Minnesota, and of course the Wolves on FanDuel Sports Network, but like the Twins are distributing their own games right now on the Twins network, or whatever it's called officially. But what's the future of that for Minnesota? And while there's a real estate background for Lori and Rodriguez, not just background, but like current, a lot of involvement there. Michael Bloomberg, former mayor of New York City, is part of the group as well. And of course, he's obviously involved in real estate too. I mean, who isn't among billionaires? But the media background, right? The Bloomberg Media Group, and the, everything that goes along with that he's been involved in. And that, in addition to the actual capital that he was able to provide, or is able to provide the group, the extra level of legitimacy in terms of he's undoubtedly the wealthiest person in the ownership group now at this point, even if he owns himself a much smaller stake than Lori and Rodriguez. but he can be part of the real estate conversation, or excuse me, the media conversation, and also the real estate conversation, but the media conversation as well. And so that's just another thing we're going to start to hear more of once this thing actually becomes finalized here moving forward. And then the last thing is actually getting closure. And we could tie all these things together, wrap it up in closure. But remember, when this thing broke just over a year ago that these groups were on the rocks, there were certainly signs that was the case. But when Glenn Taylor went public with, "Hey, I kind of wish I hadn't done this," he of course didn't say that, but he kind of did. Wasn't super great about the way he phrased it. He went on a mini media tour. Then Lorian Enriquez did. It got ugly. There was a concern that it would distract from the basketball, and then lo and behold, the Timberwolves go to the conference finals and have an awesome playoff run. Right, sweep the Phoenix Suns. But leading into the playoffs, Karl-Anthony Towns was coming off the injury. They got blown out by the Suns in game 82. It just felt kind of gross around the team. And then the playoffs changed everything. Hopefully this could be some sort of a ramp that leads into a successful playoff run for the Wolves. And I mentioned the Kevin Garnett thing. Maybe that is a thing at the end of the regular season, the start of the postseason, whenever the whole process actually gets finalized. Having closure around the whole process is going to be awesome. And like Chris Finch had some great comments a year ago about this, talking about, like, I think he said it's not affecting us at troop level or something like that. Apparently that was true. But if it's now removed from the equation, then there's really no possibility it's going to affect them. And that's better than there still being any sort of possibility. And there's not going to be questions asked of Chris Finch and the players about this, at least not ones that they won't want to, or that they would want to avoid answering. So good all the way around. Just good that this is going to come to a close, and hopefully it does very swiftly. Shifting gears, I want to talk a little bit about tonight's Brooklyn Nets matchup. I'll kind of bridge this here in a second over the segments, and then we'll talk a little bit about the Western Conference. So the Wolves have not faced the Brooklyn Nets since last season. Weirdly enough, there's like 2 weeks left of the regular season, and here we are with not having played the Nets yet at all. The Nets are 25-51. They've only won consecutive games one time since the All-Star break, and they're currently on that 2-game winning streak. They just beat the Mavericks by 4. And remember, the Mavs have Anthony Davis back. They're not he's not playing heavy minutes, and the Mavs aren't exactly in great shape, but they beat the Mavs by 4. The game prior to that, they beat the lowly Washington Wizards by 3. Prior to that, they'd had a 6-game losing streak, and the last time they'd won consecutive games was back in early February. They won 3 straight over Miami, Charlotte, and Philadelphia. Not exactly a murderer's row of opponents either. So, I mean, and you look at their last few losses. They lost to Clippers by 32. They lost to Toronto by 30. They lost to Dallas by 19. They lost a pair of games to Indiana, and they lost to Boston. On top of that, while they are in a 2-game win streak, they had some significant players available last game that aren't available this game, namely Cam Johnson, who's going to be out with the back injury. Cam Thomas is out for the year. Noah Kalani, I think, is out for the year. They've got several guys who are contributors to their rotation that are not going to be available for this game. The Cam Johnson one is, of course, the most significant. He is their leading scorer. If you take Cam Thomas out of the equation, hasn't played in a while. Cam Johnson averages almost 19 a game, shoots 39% from 3. He is their offense. They traded away other guys, Dennis Schroeder's long gone. You guys from the beginning of the season that you thought would contribute for them. I thought there was a chance that they'd be better than people expected in the East. They do have D'Angelo Russell, D'Lo, only averaging 13.3 points per game for them, shooting just 37% from the floor and 30% from 3 in a Nets uniform. His season has gone from bad to worse, being traded over to Brooklyn and just really, really struggling since he's been there. Brooklyn as a team overall they're just a really bad offensive team. There's really no other way to slice it. They play slow. They're second to last in pace in the NBA. They don't make threes. They shoot them. They don't make them. They're actually 4th in 3-point attempt rate, but they're 26th in percentage as a team. And you take guys like Cam Johnson out of the equation, and obviously Dennis Schroeder not on the team anymore. Who on this Dorian Finney-Smith, who on this team is going to make threes? Well, really nobody. Nobody has an encouraging 3-point percentage on this team. So they don't play fast. They don't make the threes that they take. They play so slow that they're actually dead last in field goals made per game, which is a weird stat, but it goes to show that's everything I just said. They play slow and they miss a lot of shots. They're dead last in field goals made. They are middle of the pack in terms of free throw rates. They do get to the line a little bit, but again, Cam Johnson's a big part of that. Cam Thomas was a really big part of it early in the season. Like other than D'Lo, who's getting to the line, and that's not exactly D'Lo's forte either. They do offensive rebound a little bit, which would be the one concern I have. And then the other one would be they do a pretty good job of forcing turnovers on the defensive end of the floor. They're top 10 in turnover rate. I think they're 6 or 7 in turnover rate. And they're actually out of the bottom third in terms of defensive rating. On cleaning the glass, they are, let's see, I think they're like 19th on cleaning the glass in terms of defensive rating. Take it back. They're 24th in defensive rating on cleaning the glass, 28th in offensive rating. And they're middle of the pack in some of these other rebounding stats that I mentioned. So as long as the Timberwolves are careful with the basketball and they can play whatever pace they want, the Nets aren't going to like run them out of the gym. They should be fine. Now, it is fair to be concerned because the Wolves struggles against shorthanded teams this season, but against a bad and shorthanded team, I'm not super concerned. The Wolves are 13.5 point favorites over at FanDuel. They should win this game going away. And everybody should be back, right? Like Dante DiVincenzo, Naz Reid back from their 1-game suspension, riding high now after this mini win streak, this win over Denver on Tuesday. This is a game the Wolves really should win pretty easily at Brooklyn. And again, the matchup does not really scare me. There's no individual matchup. D'Lo's the guy you're going to have to look out for. He may drop 50 because the Wolves struggle against guards like him that play at their own pace, knock down mid-range jumpers that also can step out and shoot the three. But as long as the Wolves don't get grabby or throw the basketball away a ton and allow transition points to a team that doesn't generally run, period, they should be just fine in this game. All right, I want to close by peeking at the Western Conference. We'll talk about recent results. We'll talk about what's different about the Wolves' profile as a team going to the playoffs compared to last year. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode is brought to us by our friends at 5 Hour Energy. Even though we're a few weeks clear of this, daylight savings snuck up on me again, and I've been feeling tired lately. I just have been. I'm feeling a little bit run down. Well, guess what? 5 Hour Energy has your back if you are in the same boat as me. The extra sunshine because of daylight savings time means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through. If you're staying up late watching the NCAA tournament, maybe you're doing that this weekend. Maybe you're watching NBA games late. The Wolves played a 9 p.m. game on Tuesday in Denver. That was rough. Or maybe you're just trying to do more stuff, make the most out of your daylight. You're playing golf after work. You're working out late, whatever. 5 Hour Energy can give you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. Extra daylight means extra activities. Springtime means extra activities. Maybe you want to get outside on the weekend. You're just busier. You're on the go more often, whether you're at a game or you're traveling. 5 Hour Energy is easy to grab and helps keep you feel refreshed. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your door. Need one now? Grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They're everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized. All right. As of this recording, and I'm recording this during the Clippers-Pelicans game. Now, they're playing the Pelicans, and they're up 15. And it's almost halftime. So I feel pretty good about I'm not happy about it, but I feel like it's pretty likely the Clippers are going to win. Other notable Western Conference results from Wednesday: Sacramento lost to Washington. That's not all that notable, although it is embarrassing if you're Sacramento. Let's see. Houston won easily over Utah, and Dallas squeaked out a win over the Hawks. Also, Denver lost to San Antonio. That's a pretty significant one because guess what? The Wolves are now actually only 2.5 games behind Denver for the 4 spot in the Western Conference. Now, there's 2 teams between them in Memphis and Golden State, both teams that have the tiebreaker over the Wolves. The Wolves swept the season series against Denver 4-0. So if the Wolves maybe beat Memphis next week, they're actually tied right now record-wise with Memphis. If Golden State finally might at some point hit a rough patch, the Wolves can get to 5, and then you end up tied with Denver at 4, and then the Wolves get that tiebreaker. So it's notable that Denver lost. The Clippers, if they do win, will have an identical record to the Wolves and be tied for 7th. So in this scenario, assuming the Clippers win by the time you're listening to this, The Grizzlies, Wolves, and Clippers will all be 44 and 32 and tied for the 6, 7, 8 spot in the West, just a half game behind Golden State, who's 44 and 31. Dallas is 6 games back, and Sacramento's a game and a half beyond that back. So don't worry about those teams. It's actually mathematically now impossible, I think, for them to. I think the Wolves have 6 games left, so they can't catch Minnesota for the 7 spot, or worst case, the 8th spot for the Wolves. So the Wolves cannot fall lower than 8 in the West, but they could mathematically get as high as 3rd in the Western Conference. That's still possible. The Lakers and Nuggets are in a virtual tie for 3 and 4. So a lot still to be said in the West. And of course, I always like to remind just how good the Wolves have been against the Western Conference. The top of the West, they're 2-2 against OKC, 2-2 against Houston, 3-0 against Denver, who's sitting in 3rd, 2-2 against the Lakers, who are in 4th, and some weird stuff in those matchups in terms of who is available. They struggled against Golden State, 1-3, 0-2 with 1 to play against Memphis. They're 6th. And then you look right below the Wolves. The Wolves are, I said 4-0 against Denver. Who's right below? Oh, the Clippers. The Wolves are 3-0 against the Clippers. They're 4-0 against Phoenix. They're 2-1 against Dallas. Like all these teams, the Wolves have been really good against. Only Golden State and Memphis, who are tied with the Wolves. Those are the only teams that Minnesota has really struggled with in the West. So what's most different about this Wolves team? And last, I think Friday, I did on the show why to feel really good about this team going into the playoffs. And one of the things I talked a little bit about is how the Wolves can win in different ways. And to kind of illustrate that, we can look at the 4 factors. Like I know I talk about 4 factors a lot. It's just such a good snapshot at a team's body of work. And last season going into the playoffs, Minnesota was number 1 with the bullet defense in terms of defensive rating. They were 2.6 points per 100 possessions better. It was a gap that we've only seen 3 times in the last 25 years between the best and second best defensive team in the league. Just really, really dominant defensively. Offensively, they were 16th according to Cleaning the Glass, and they were bottom 3rd of the league in terms of offensive rebound rate and turnover rate. And they shot the 3 great, but they turned it over too much, and they didn't give themselves second chance points. They were pretty good at getting to the line and good in terms of their shot mix and how good they were at the rim and outside the arc. So they still ended up being kind of middle of the pack offensively. That meant they were 3rd overall in terms of point differential. This year, Minnesota's 6th in point differential. They've dropped to 5th in terms of defensive rating. And by the way, as good as the Wolves defense was last year, OKC's has been even more dominant. Better points per 100 possessions. The Wolves would still be 2nd this year. Their mark from last year would be 2nd this year ahead of Orlando. The gap between OKC and Orlando, 1 and 2, is actually 3 full points per 100 possessions. So this would be the 4th time in the last 26 years or whatever that a team has had a gap that big of 2 points or more over that 2nd place team defensively. Anyway, back to the Wolves. Minnesota's still top 5 in terms of defensive rating, but the offense has gone from what was 16th last year to 10th this year. And the way they've done it is offensive rebounding, and they've reduced their turnover rate. I mean, put very simply, the free throw rate and the effective field goal percentage, 3-point percentage is actually down a little bit. But the offensive rebound rate is up significantly from bottom 3rd of the league to 15th, and the turnover rate is down just a little bit. Actually, the percentage is identical, but in terms of their ranking league-wide, it's improved by 5 spots. I think that's a good way to illustrate it, the turnover rate and the offensive rebound rate going in the right direction. But the way the Wolves actually can function offensively, last year it was Ant doing Ant stuff in isolation, and it was Ant driving kicks, and it was Karl-Anthony Towns, as a secondary creator in a different role than anything the Wolves have this year. This season, the Wolves have found a way to be different and more, I think, multifaceted offensively, because Julius Randle is more of a distributor than Karl-Anthony Towns. And they still have the horses in terms of 3-point shooters. Even if the overall team percentage isn't as good and they don't have Cat, Randle's held his own, and you still have to respect it. Dante DiVincenzo has rounded back into form. Mike Conley's rounding back into form. Nickeil Alexander-Walker's been great. You throw in some of these role guys who are at the end of the rotation in Jalen Clark, and the other night, Josh Minot, who I wouldn't have included until that game on Monday or Tuesday. The way that the Wolves can beat you with this year's team is there's more of them. You don't have to rely on a hot, like in the playoffs, it was all about Ant. Cat was great, but he wasn't, you couldn't rely on him to get his own offense with consistency in the playoffs, and also keep others involved. And Julius Randle, as frustrating as it can be when he puts his head down and just tries to get to 10 feet and launch a fadeaway, when he's going, he's also still looking to make passes to teammates. And that wasn't always, Karl Anthony Towns was kind of one or the other. And Randle finds a way to do both. And to have that as kind of your next, your secondary star, I guess, really, next to Anthony Edwards, is super valuable. And the team's deeper in terms of offensive upside and variance. And I mean that in a good way. Donte DiVincenzo can go nuclear and score 20 plus. Like, Kyle Anderson was never going to do that. And that's basically your biggest difference, is he's part of the rotation instead of Kyle Anderson. Obviously some other tweaks at the end of it, but like the starting lineup is the same, with Randle instead of Towns. Nas is the same. Nikhil is the same. But to have the upside offensively, somebody like Donte DiVincenzo, in addition to Nas, who's still there, and you still have the ability to win defensively. You're still a top 5 defense. We've seen them lock teams down at times over the last several weeks, especially. They've still got all of the great individual defenders that were on the team last year. They still have Rudy Gobert, even if he's a year older. But as we've seen, it's been more about lack of motivation, which is clearly still a problem. And so I'm not like explaining it away like, well, they'll try hard in the playoffs. It's not quite that simple to flip a switch, although they apparently do it every time they play the Nuggets. But that top flight defense, even if it's not quite as dominant as last year, something very similar is still in there for the Wolves. They can still be that dominant defensively. So they can still beat you dominant with defensive dominance. They can still beat you with Anthony Edwards doing Ant ISOs and all the stuff Ant does. We saw him in crunch time against in the win against the Nuggets on Tuesday. It was awesome. But you have these other elements, the scoring off the bench with Nas and DiVincenzo together, the Randle distributing and running offense through him with Ant playing off the ball. Like, those things are better this year that weren't components of what they did last year. And it's taken them from 16th in offense last season to 10th with 6 games to play this year. So a lot to like about where the Wolves sit now going into the playoffs. And with the schedule, a couple of games against the Nets, some other winnable games, Utah down the stretch. It's a real shot the Wolves can get into the 5-6 range and maybe even to 4 in the Western Conference over the final couple of weeks. All right, that's all we got for you today here on the show. Big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app, on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. You can also subscribe to the Locked On Wolves daily newsletter at lockedondaily.com. You'll get an email to your inbox every day, Monday through Friday. All things Wolves, all things NBA. Sign up at lockedondaily.com. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.